All right, my friends, welcome to another episode here on the Red Delta Project podcast and live feed Q&A, where we take a fundamental approach to fitness to simplify diet and exercise, giving you more power, control, and freedom over your healthy lifestyle. As always, I'm Matt Schifferly, and today's episode is sponsored by Duonomic, makers of one of the best doorway calisthenics gyms out there with their Elvia pull-up handles, their power hold grip tools, and of course, their latest ring package. You can find links down to the Duonomic website down below. Use promo code GRINDSTYLE for 10% off. And I also put the links down below for the video reviews I made on all of those products as well. So today is part 2 of the Everything You Think You Know About Fitness is Wrong series. Pardon the clickbaity style titles and stuff. But last week, I started to explore why I use that title in the idea that most of how we perceive how fitness works is based on a flawed premise. And that flawed premise is what I've often come to call a method-based approach, which works simply that, if you want a given result, then you use the method that produces that result. So if you want to lose weight, then you use the diet that is best for losing weight. Or if you want to build muscle, then you do the exercise or the workout program that is best for building muscle. It makes a lot of sense. However, I gave my 3 pieces of evidence before the court on why this is a flawed premise. The first of which is that human beings have always been able to achieve that type of physiological adaptation since the dawn of time, and every human being on the planet will experience those types of changes in their body to some degree. Everybody builds muscle, everybody burns fat, everybody improves how well they can functionally perform in some way, shape, and form, regardless of having no universal method whatsoever with all of these examples. There's 7 billion people on the planet right now. All of us will experience changes in our body with muscle and strength and fat loss and improvement in our performance, and there is not a single method that is universal between all of them. So how can we say that a particular method or any method is actually really that important for producing a given result? Second piece of evidence was that even though we can certainly use such methods, when you look at people who have experienced a given result, like a lot of people are lean, a lot of people have lost weight, you can't pin it down to any particular method. Like most people out there who are lean and healthy do not follow any particular diet. Most people who build muscle do not follow any particular exercise program. Yet when we ask experts out there, it's like, if I want to build muscle, what should I do? I'm like, you definitely need to do this kind of exercise. You definitely need to be doing this kind of program. When anecdotally, the evidence is clearly showing that no, you definitely don't. And the last piece of evidence was the fact that most people who adopt a particular method will struggle and fail to achieve that type of adaptation. So you look at any type of diet, most people will fail to lose the weight they want on it, or at least keep the weight off. Most people who take on some sort of strength or muscle building program will not get the results they want. Most people who seek to improve how well they can perform at any sort of functionality, skill, I want to be a better golfer, we're not going to get what we want out of it. So these 3 pieces of evidence I bring to basically illustrate this idea that the method-based approach in fitness just doesn't work the way we think it does, because it's not clear, cut, and dry. You could take 1,000 people, give them all the same diet and workout programs, and you're going to get 1,000 different outcomes. Now, they may trend in a certain direction to some degree, but it's by no means reliable. And that's the point that I really want to dive into, is how can we put our faith in a approach to fitness that just is not reliable? If you went into any other type of business, like a restaurant, for example, and they're like, yeah, about 20% of customers receive the order that they wanted from their order of food. They'd be like, well, that was a crappy restaurant. And yet failure is this ever-present part of fitness. Most people will never achieve the results they want. And the few who do achieve some degree of results will have it be fleeting. And yet the 1% of the 1% who do achieve it, of course, are the standard for what we all hope to achieve. We see it all the time in social media. We see it all the time in testimonials of I used this method and I got this result. And we think that's reliable evidence that result, that method works. And it's not. Just because of the fact that failure is quiet. You could have 1,000 people fail miserably and 10 people succeed, and you'll see those 10 people used as examples ad nauseum for years as proof that it works, when in fact it really doesn't. So today we're going to be looking at what does work, how does fitness actually work, and even though we may not look at a particular method of diet or exercise, it doesn't necessarily mean that the method you use isn't important. It is, but it's important for very, very different reasons than we think. Because no, you don't lose weight because you do intermittent fasting. You don't build muscle because you do deadlifts and pull-ups. And you don't improve your golf swing because you practice how to golf. These are things that we have often correlated with a success rate, but it's actually not what's causing the result in the first place. And today we're going to explore what actually does. Let's see if we can't get to some folks coming on in right off the bat here. Esteban coming on. Some questions. Ask your questions, folks. Remember, if you put a "Hey Matt" in the subject line, that tells me that it's directed at me and you're not all just conversing of yourselves, which I always appreciate that you folks do, because it's a very supportive community here. I really appreciate that you're all here to help each other. But Esteban is saying, "Hey Matt, what are top tips for pull-ups? How to get the most from them? Common mistakes you see people make." All right, very good. So the number one tip I would give for pull-ups that I've recently been really hammering home, and it's made a hell of a difference, is really protract the mother living hell out of your shoulders. Like, how far back should your shoulders be? The answer is more. Is this far back enough? No, more. When I started to really exaggerate that ability to get my shoulders back, I was able to engage my lats and my traps to a much higher degree, which is very key with pull-ups. Because when your shoulders are more protracted, if your back isn't really that much engaged, you're relying on your shoulders and your biceps to do most of the work, which sounds great, but those are relatively small, weak muscles compared to the big muscles in your back. And the pull-up is a very heavy exercise, assuming we're talking about the full body weight version. So you're talking about a lot of work done by small muscles. It's very hard to get very productive with that. So get the shoulders back. Keep your abs engaged as well. So that helps to offset and keep things balanced. And last but not least is really try to make an emphasis of getting your chest to your hands instead of just trying to like get your chin over the bar kind of thing. This is one of the many reasons why I stopped using the term chin up years ago, is because I don't want to emphasize this idea of chin up over the bar, chin. I want our attention to be chest to the hands. And that's going to help you get a lot more out of those pull-ups as well. One more question before we dive into today's subject matter. Jamie coming on. Does it really matter to build to muscle building to eat higher protein? It might, but it matters more of your current status. So one of the things that we're going to be really exploring ad nauseum today and in the subsequent episodes that I'm going to be diving into, because again, this is all previews to one of my upcoming books that I'll be writing later this year, is that a lot of your ability to get a result, it doesn't depend on eating more protein. It depends on your current status and whether or not eating more protein does anything beneficial to that status. So this is one of the reasons why people will sometimes ask me, like, why don't you make a video on like how to do pull-ups for women or how to build muscle for people over 40? And the reason why I don't make those sorts of things is because the 90% of it's all bullshit. Because I don't care what gender you are. I don't care what age you are. Honestly, I don't think it's that important. Your ability to get a result from doing something depends on your current status first, and whether or not changing something like eating more protein has any sort of progressive influence from that status. So some people, are going to eat more protein and nothing's going to happen at all because they're already eating enough. That's how nutrition works. You only get a benefit if you're not getting enough to satisfy your demands, your nutritional demands. So if you're not satisfying your nutritional demands right now, then yes, getting more protein will be beneficial. But if you're already meeting those demands, eating more will do nothing for you at all. There's no benefit at all to it. It's 10,000 spoons when all you need is a knife, quoting Alanis Morissette there. So the ability to benefit from something depends on your need or ability to benefit from it to begin with, not whether or not it's whey protein, not whether or not it's a certain number of grams or all these sorts of things. And the best way to figure this out, as I always tell people, is stabilize your habits first, get your protein intake relatively stable, and then just increase it and see what happens. As I usually have 3 eggs in the morning, great, bump it up to 6. See if anything happens. And look at other subjective things too. It may not have anything to do with muscle building. You could say, well, I haven't really noticed I'm getting stronger in the gym or anything, but I feel like if I eat more protein in the morning, I'm just not as hungry come lunchtime, and I feel better. My energy level's better than the day. Great, awesome, go with that. That's perfectly good reason to keep those 6 egg things going instead of the 3. So going into today's topic then, what we're talking about, though, is the way fitness works is we've been long told that it depends on what your diet is and what your workout program is and what your exercise is. And are you lifting dumbbells versus kettlebells? And it's not to say this stuff isn't important, because it is, but it's not really what's driving the bus. I'm never going to tell someone you're going to be healthier and lose weight if you stop eating bread. I'm never going to tell someone you're going to build muscle if you eat more protein. Because to be perfectly honest with you, if I knew that sort of thing, then I'll just go out and buy lottery tickets, because clearly I'm omnipotent and I can be clairvoyant and I know everything. Right? I know the unknown kind of thing. No, most type advice is just guesswork. It's like, I'm guessing you're drinking too much. I'm guessing you need more protein and stuff. Instead, what's really happening, as I mentioned in the previous episode, is that fitness is due to physiological processes that are always ongoing in our body. It's not because of your diet. It's not because of your workout. It's not because of the supplement that you're taking or anything. What makes fitness works is the fact that our body has a very high capacity for quick adaptation. That's one of the great things about us humans. We're very adaptable to our environment. So when we change our exercise and our diet and just anything in our environment, hell, when I moved to altitude here in Denver, Colorado, I changed the oxygen saturation in the air that I'm around because I'm here at altitude. And that was something that changed in the environment. My body adapted accordingly. So the reason why our body can adapt is because we have these physiological processes in our body. And I'm just going to grossly oversimplify this for the sake of fitness here. When it comes to exercise, we have environmental stimuli impacting our body, okay? And that's just everything. That's everything from how hot it is to what your muscles are doing, to your breathing, to sunlight. I mean, everything in your environment, temperature, everything about your diet and workouts and stuff is your environmental stimuli. And it's always constantly telling your body what kind of shape it needs to be in. And your body is always adapting to this. It's 24/7. These physiological processes are always going on. Okay? And then you have, of course, adaptation to that stimuli. And that's, again, always going on. We often think in fitness that when we do something about diet and exercise, we're turning something on or we're making something happen. But the fact is we're not. Your diet and your workout habits do nothing special at all. Because what they're making happen in the body is stuff that's always happening. You always are building muscle. You always have an anabolic process going on. Of course, you always have a catabolic process going on in your muscles. You always have cellular adaptation and generation. You also have cellular degeneration. Okay? Same thing with nutrition. You're always consuming nutrients. You're always expending nutrients and utilizing nutrients at the same time. You're always building fat. You're always storing fat 24/7. I don't care. Even if you're fasting, you are storing fat today, and there's nothing you can do to stop that. But at the same time, you're also burning it 24/7. And I know a lot of people are like, do this and you'll burn fat. Do this, you'll store fat. That's like telling someone, do this and you'll breathe. You're always doing it. You don't need to make it happen. because the physiological processes that govern your health and your fitness are 24/7. And you don't do anything to them. They're on autopilot. They're 100% governed by the laws of Mother Nature. So what does that mean about your diet and exercise habits? Your diet and exercise habits don't do anything at all as far as making that process happen. That's like being a surfer and you get up on your board and you're surfing the surf and like the waves and stuff. The surfer doesn't do anything to those waves, but the surfer is utilizing those waves to practice their sport. Fitness works exactly the same way. You don't do anything to your physiological process. When you have a change in your diet and your workout program, what you are doing is you're using that process and directing it in the way you want to go. Just like a surfer may direct their board so that they are going in certain directions and stuff. They're not making that wave do anything. The laws of nature are moving the wave. Right? It's too powerful. That surfer could stand in the surf and be like, halt to the wave, and the wave will just crash over them like, as if they were nothing. But the surfer recognizes this and says, I'm not trying to control the wave. I'm utilizing this tool, the surfboard, and my skills to use it to have fun and have this experience. We use fitness the exact same way. Okay? Your muscles are going to adapt and change to your environmental stimuli 24/7. But when I do pull-ups, all I'm doing is taking that adaptive process and saying, hey, you need to go in this direction. So that way it's adapting in this way. So I can build strength and muscle and stuff to handle the environmental stimuli that is pull-ups. So the methods we use are important, but they don't make anything happen. They're not responsible for your results. The physiological processes of Mother Nature are responsible for your results. What you do with your diet and exercise is you influence and direct that process. You're powerless to it. You can't control it. And that's one of the things that we all want. I understand. We want to control our body fat levels. We want to control muscle and strength, but you can't control these things, but you can influence them. You can use the process to your benefit. Okay, so let's put a pin in that and get to some more questions here right now. Grand Rapids asking how to reduce armpit fat, which are good exercises to hide. This is a common thing that I get a lot of times from women. And a couple things going on here. One is it's oftentimes a posture thing. You're hunching forward and stuff. Everything kind of collects forward and it's just, it's kind of like if you hunch forward and you pinch your belly fat. Yeah, you're collecting it. And if you have a stronger posture, you're stretching out the fat pads in this area. My good friend calls this the boulder, right here on the outside of the pec. He's the boulder. He's like, yeah, it's the boulder. It's between the boob and the shoulder. It's the boulder. I'm like, okay, fine, whatever you want to call it. But he always was like, you have good posture that's going to stretch out that fat pad. And a lot of times the appearance of our body has more to do with our posture and body language than almost anything else. I've had people who practice bridges, particularly, and people are like, you look stronger, you look more confident, you look tougher and stuff. And it's like, I'm just standing straighter. Like I'm not hunched over quite as much. So that's the first thing I'd recognize. Second is, again, with women, the reason why this is a bit more of an issue is because breast tissue extends up into that area. We typically think of breast tissue as being in a much more collected single area of the body. But if you ever talk to someone who has had to undergo a mastectomy, they carve out like a big swath of flesh all the way up to the shoulder, because that's how far reaching breast tissue goes. So a lot of times, quote, armpit fat is just an extension of breast tissue of how you're genetically built. So, that's how it is. So generally, that's the way to go about it, is better with posture. Of course, lowering body fat as a whole will help. But because of fat and adipose deposition being more genetic, it's generally how you're built. You're probably going to be able to make those areas smaller, but probably not really get rid of it, unfortunately. So look to the postural things to get more of a handle on it. Dave is asking here, hey Matt, how important is fun for general physical preparedness in your opinion? Do we like to gamify the progression? Absolutely. GMB, Gold Medal Bodies, Gold Medal Body Fitness, is really good about this sort of thing, because one of the reasons why fun is so important in fitness is because it really embraces a creative aspect to the process. Okay, so this is why we have to recognize that it's not about following a program or a diet that's going to save you from whatever ills you want to avoid or give you the best chance of getting the result you want. Because what we do when we are influencing these physiological processes is we actually need to use a creative aspect to it. No one knows for sure how you really should work out, much less on a day-to-day basis, or how you should eat and stuff. It's a problem-solving thing. And so when we gamify things, we have a little bit more of a playful nature to it. But think of like when you were a kid and you were playing with your friends and stuff, and you were even playing a regular game in your backyard. When I was growing up, we used to play softball in my backyard, but we got creative with it because sometimes we would hit the ball into our garden or into the pool that we had. And we're like, okay, if it's in the pool, is that a home run? And we're like, no. Okay, if it goes in the pool, it's a double. If it's in the garden, it's a triple. Because we would sometimes spend like 20 minutes looking for the damn ball in the garden and stuff. Is like, okay, we can't always have that be a grand slam every time because it wasn't that far away. So we made that rule. Oh, it's in the garden, double. So we were creative with it. We made better use of the environment to produce better outcomes. And that's why having a gamified system or even a playful nature with our workouts is very important, because it opens up the doors of creativity. It's not do it by the book, do it exactly this way, eat exactly this way. We think being on the straight and narrow is going to save us. And most of the time it's not, because it becomes just very dogmatic, which basically means go this way, even if it's not going in the direction you want it to be. So yeah, having fun with your workouts and being creative is incredibly important. It's not something that is, trivial. A lot of times when people hear fun and stuff, they think it's trivial. It's not. It's extremely important. Jesus coming on. Nate Greens from Venezuela. Very nice. Right here, I tried to implement the grind calisthenics system, and my trainings became shorter than anyone else. Then they began to worry about me only training for 15 minutes. Hey, man, if you can get it done, that's the most important thing. And we'll be discussing this a little bit more in future episodes here, because today we're talking about the physiological processes and how fitness actually depends on these processes. And in next week's episode, I'll be talking about training to influence the process. And next week, we'll talk about nutrition and diet and stuff. But that's the great thing, is when you recognize what type of influence you're trying to create, what the objective is of your training, you often get rid of a lot of the fluff and a lot of the stuff that really isn't doing very much in your workouts. And as a result, your workouts get a hell of a lot shorter. And it's easy to get caught up into the idea of, oh, I'm going to work my way to results. But you can work yourself to death and get nowhere. Believe me, I've done it. I've done it for years. There's no point of pride of being the hardest worker in the room. Lots of times, in my experience, the guy bragging about being the hardest worker in the room is also often the most incompetent worker in the room. And yet I've known other people who are like, yeah, I studied for this test, took me 20 minutes. Like, gosh, dear Lord, how in the world did you study? Was it in school? I was a terrible student. It'd take me hours to study for the smallest exam or the test. It's like, how are you people? And of course, I wore it like a badge of honor. Like, I worked so much harder. You studied for 20 minutes. I had to study for 3 hours and I had to stay up late and everything, as if that made me better. And of course, they would ace the test and I would struggle to get a B- at best, because they were better learners. They knew the objective they needed to accomplish with their studying. They could get it done so much faster. Meanwhile, I was not a very good student. I wasn't very skillful at it. And therefore, I had to work twice as hard for half the grade. Let's see. Esteban coming on. Hey, man, what do you think are the best team sports for developing overall fitness? Excuse me. That's a good question. Because in general, like, I need to make a video on this. Is sport and fitness are actually in opposition to one another in many ways. The way you approach training your body for sport is completely different than fitness. In fact, in many ways, you want to do exactly the opposite. So a lot of times, that's why I often tell people sport is not a good way to get in shape. It's not a good way to condition the body effectively. It's usually terribly inefficient and very, very convoluted. So usually if you came to me and you're like, I just want to get in better shape, I would say, okay, don't do a sport. That's probably the last thing we want to do. But if you're like, but I also like to play basketball, then I was like, okay, let's put that in the plan. Let's make that part of the process for sure. But I would never tell someone, play this sport to get in shape. That's like saying, okay, learn how to code computers in order to cook a meal. It's just completely different in what you're trying to do. But some things, like gymnastics is a common one where people is like, if you get good in gymnastics, you're probably pretty proficient in using your body as a whole. Martial arts is another common one. Generally, anything that has a very dynamic, with various ways of movement is probably going to be your best bet. Things like my mountain biking, right? That's probably the worst thing you could possibly do to get in shape because it's very singular in what it is. And that's why you have a lot of injuries and you have a lot of overuse and a lot of things because you're in the same position, many repetitions, just for hours on end. Not to say mountain biking's bad, but I certainly wouldn't do that to get in shape. If you came to me and you said, I'm going to get in shape, I'm going to go mountain biking, I'm like, okay, great. But what else? Tell me that's not your only ploy. That's like saying, I'm going to build this house and all I've got is this Phillips head screwdriver. You need more tools than that. So any sort of activities that give you many tools is probably going to be the best way to going about it. That's a good question. I like that. Eggman, how's it going? Hey, Matt. How can we explain the people who eat trash, sleep bad without exercise, can be slim, while there are other people who eat, I love this question, and sleep well with exercise and still struggle getting fitter? Okay, so awesome. Very good. So we were talking about how the result of your fitness is due to this physiological process that's always ongoing. It's just constantly moving through. That's what's controlling your fitness. You have no control over it entirely, but you can influence it. Now, here's the thing. There are thousands of influences to this process, okay? And there are still many, many influences that you have no control over whatsoever, okay? I'm thinking like age and genetics and some things that you can't control. Like we were talking about, where body fat is deposited on your body. It's like, yep, you can't control that. Sorry, it's just the way it is kind of thing. There are other influences that you can control, but they're really hard to change. Like, where do you live? I live here in Denver, Colorado. I got the Rockies in my backyard. That's awesome. But if I wanted to become, blanking here, but like a surfer, we were talking about surfing. This is a terrible place to learn how to surf. Like, I do not stand much of a chance becoming a good surfer living here in Denver. I should go somewhere where there's coastline and reliable surf and stuff. So I can change that. I could move to California, but it's going to be a lot harder. And then there are other influences that are much easier to change. Like, I've got a big bag of cookies in my pantry. Okay, I can get rid of that today. That's an influence there. So there are thousands and thousands and thousands of influences to this process. So when we look at someone who seemingly has, a few influences that don't make sense, like, okay, they have a crappy diet, bad sleep, and they don't work out, and they're skinny and strong as hell. And meanwhile, this other person over here eats super clean and they work out like crazy and they're terribly in shape. What's going on? Simple. You're looking at a couple of influences, like you watch them, going to McDonald's for the 14th time that week or whatever. And you're like, but it's like, yeah, that McDonald's is an influence. And in many cases, we would consider that a detrimental influence, but they probably have thousands of other influences that are going the other direction, that are still keeping them lean. Okay? And we don't understand all of the influences. We're still trying to figure out how most of them work. And that's why, to a large degree, I know we don't like to admit this, and I know you don't want to hear this, but it's absolutely true. A lot of your result and success in life and fitness really boils down to a whole lot of luck. Sorry to say it, but yeah, you can do everything right and still completely fail. and fall way short. And you can also have these people who are like, oh, gee, I got to get into this calisthenics thing. So what do you call this? This muscle up. Oh, let me try that. Bang. And they bang out 10 of them. And meanwhile, you've been trying to get one for the past 8 months. Like, what? Sorry. Yeah. Maybe they've got influences that work for them. They were a gymnast and when they were younger or something like that. Who knows? They were big into American Ninja Warrior and they built a ramp in their backyard. So they spent hours getting up on top of that ramp and just that motion there. And they're like, oh, I guess I just do the same thing and muscle up, bingo, right? There's always a ton of influences that we're unaware of that are partially responsible for a given result. So the point of that is we're never fully in control. You can't have full control of your weight. You can't have full control of your muscle and your strength and stuff. It's impossible. Nobody has full control of it because nobody has full control over that process and nobody understands all of those influences. It'd be insane. There's more influences in your daily life than there are probably like atoms in the sun kind of thing. There's tons of them. So that's why you want to recognize what influences are around you that you can change and improve upon. So at least you can have some degree of power in that process. Will that be enough to get you what you want? Who knows? No one knows for sure. Not everybody who picks up a basketball is going to make it to the NBA because everybody's got a different set of circumstantial influences. But you might as well learn to play basketball if you like to play basketball. More questions here. Andreas, hey, I want to join the live stream to thank you and Daniel from Fitness FAQ for the amazing podcast episode you did. Thank you. Yes, Daniel's an amazing interviewer. I highly recommend everybody check out his channel and his podcast, packed with amazing, interesting, well-explained content. Thank you so very, very much. All right. Let's see what else. Oh, Wolfie Dragon. Oh, yeah. Sorry. You recovering from COVID there last year. I hope your recovery is going a little bit better there, Wolfie Dragon. Ravi, here we go. Hey, Matt, I'm 44. You're my age. Excellent. And thinking more about longevity than gains than when I was younger. Happens when you get older. Yes. Is there a sweet spot for volume and intensity for long-term athleticism? Oh, very good. So this is why creativity, as I was mentioning before, can be very good. Because I could give you a recommendation for volume. Okay, 3 sets, right? 3 sets. 3 sets. That's how many you should do. But no matter what number I would give you, it's going to be wrong most of the time because there's a lot of influences that are going to determine what 3 sets are going to mean for you. Some days, 3 sets are going to just beat you to snot. Other days, 3 sets are barely going to be a warm-up. And you're like, I'm just getting ready to rock and roll. Let's go. And you're like, nope, 3 sets is all I can do. That's why when it comes to training, it's so much more important to prioritize objective progression and objective-based training. So you have it as something you're trying to accomplish in your workout as opposed to just working yourself hard. Don't give in to the idea or don't fall too much into the notion that it's stress that changes the body. It's not. Because if it was stress that would change the body, none of us would ever change until we were stressed. But your body is always changing. Your body is always adapting. It's not stress, but education that changes the body. So when we are working out, we want to basically be teaching our body. Yes, it's going to be hard and it's going to be stressful, but that's not your objective. Your objective is not to beat your body up. Your objective is to learn how to do whatever it is better. Like I was talking earlier about retracting your shoulder blades more when you're doing pull-ups. Okay? You do 5 pull-ups with more retracted shoulder blades, bang, your pull-up workout's now more effective. Regardless of whether or not that's beating you up and exhausting you or really making the pull-ups, hard and stressing your joints and all of that sort of thing, it's instantly going to be better for you because it's just more effective. So when you are going for longevity, prioritize education over stress. And last but not least, save a little in the tank. Work within your means. Don't make it your objective to just drive yourself into the ground with your workouts. You want to make sure that you're leaving a little bit in the tank. So when you finish your workout, you're like, could have done a little more, could have spent a little bit more. Great, awesome, wonderful. Bank strength, as Paul Wade often talks about. Friendly is asking, is this pre-recorded? No, my friend, this is live. This is live and in color right here. So every little mistake that I make is going to be saved for posterity for all eternity in the time capsule that is the internet. So yeah, it's always here. Micro workout question. Do you still practice micro workouts every day? Pretty much, because that's what I have time for. Like my work these days is getting very busy. So yeah, I train what I can, when I can, as I can. I don't have any sort of particular schedule or routine that I follow at all. It's like, okay, I've got 20 minutes before my next client. Legs, let's hit some legs. Let's get some legs done. Okay, great. That'll be satisfying. And, I'll check out my scoreboard and see what I'm trying to work on. Like, okay, make sure the hips are more extended during sissy squats or whatever. Awesome, great. And that's my workout strategy. But yeah, a little bit of something every day. Let's see, Paul Bruce. Good to see you, Paulie. Hey, Matt, I've been dealing with Piriformis syndrome for 9 years. Ouch, my friend. Physio helps sometimes, but I'm trying to find the root cause and fixes there. Can you provide any guidance? Yeah, I mean, physio is definitely where I would go, maybe get another opinion from that sort of thing. Chiropractic might help a little bit because that was one of my issues from my chiropractic experience from last year. And I have no doubt, I was just speaking with my chiropractor yesterday at a party, and I have no doubt he saved my training career because he addressed a lot of things. And a lot of times the root causes to stuff like that have nothing to do with the muscle itself. Like I had like the hip, my left hip, my right shoulder and stuff. And I was like, I don't know, doc, I'm stretching my back. I'm stretching my hip. And he's like, nope, it's your neck. I'm like, my neck, dear God, what the hell? And he was totally right. Like I got my neck back in alignment and all of a sudden that hip thing just cleared right on up. So that may very well be the case. A lot of times when we have piriformis issues, it's not the piriformis because if we are dealing with an issue, if what you're doing is really effective, it should fix it. Full stop. So like I always give this example of people who are always rolling the IT bands, for umpteenth time, like IT bands. I see them a month later, they're still rolling out their IT bands. Dude, IT bands is not going to get fixed by rolling it out. Nobody has tight IT bands because of a lack of foam rolling. So we want to go after the root cause because when you get that root handled, it should fix it pretty quick and be done with it, and you can move on from it. So get a second opinion is what I would do, or at least ask your physical therapist, what is causing this? Why is it here? Let's not address the symptoms. Let's go after the cause. And they should be able to find that sort of thing. Milana, hey, Matt, do you ever watch UFC? Will you watch UFC 273 tonight? I sometimes do. A good buddy of mine, we often get together and we watch it. I don't really follow it enough to really know like the fighters who are really like up and coming and the stories behind them and everything like that. I did get into it a little bit. I mean, back in the Randy Couture days and stuff. Yes, I know I'm that old, but yeah, I'll give him a call. Actually, I need to contact him because he's my cameraman for all my grind style calisthenics videos, and I've been way behind on that. And that's something that I need to talk to him about. So maybe he'll invite me over. Let's see, what else can we do? So we're talking about influences back in, we can influence this process. Now, one of the things to recognize with that creative aspect is that we all have different influential circumstances. And the example I give this is, imagine if you came to me and you're like, I've got to come up with $500 extra by the end of the month in cash, extra. Like it can't be part of my normal income or something like that. What should I do? I'm like, okay, here's what you do. You're going to quit drinking. You're going to brown bag your lunch, and you're going to sell your golf clubs. Okay, that'll get you $500 in cash. It's like, well, how do I know that's going to work? Like, how do I know you have golf clubs? How do I know you drink enough to make that happen? You could be like, okay, but I drink like one beer with some friends every couple of weeks. It's going to save like $14 if that. Like, that's not really going to be that much of an influence. But someone else could spend like $60 a week in booze, and that could be a decent influence. So when we are talking again about like, why is that person eating McDonald's and they're lean and that person's eating healthy and they're still overweight? The thing is, different influences have different amounts of pull for different people. And that's why the same thing doesn't necessarily work for everybody. So if you came to me and said, okay, you're going to quit drinking to save money, that all depends, again, on you in your current circumstance. If you're barely spending anything on alcohol, then quitting drinking is not going to do anything to your financial bottom line for the most part. It's a small influence, but for someone else, it could be big. So this is why a lot of the just general blind shooting in the dark advice out there, like eat more protein, is guesswork, because that could be a beneficial influence or it could be a tiny influence. It depends on your circumstances, and it depends on other influences and those influences and those influences, and it's a fractal system. So when we're looking at different influences, that's why I often tell people, like, have some self-awareness about your circumstances. A lot of times when people ask me in one-on-one training and they're like, okay, I need to improve my diet. How do I do that? I'll turn it right back around on them. They're like, okay, give me 3 things you can do to improve your diet. Because how do I know? There's no way I know. I could give you general, shooting in the dark advice, like, okay, less junk food, no sugary beverages, and drink more water. I mean, of course, I'm pulling these answers straight out of my ass. Like, I'm basing them on nothing at all. But you, my friend, know your circumstances better than I do. So if I asked you, it's like, okay, what's the one thing you can do to improve your workouts? You're instantly going to turn your attention into what is actually going on in your life. It's like, well, I tend to skip out on 2 workouts every week and I need to get in the gym more consistently, or I keep skipping legs. It's like, okay, great. You're the one with the front row seat to your life. You know your circumstances better than I do. You know your influences better than I do. Therefore, you're the one who knows probably best what you can do to modify the most potent influences to influence those physiological processes to get the best result. Me, I'm just guessing. I'm making guesswork here. And because of that, most of what I would tell you probably isn't going to work. Or if it does, it's probably going to be a big cost to a low benefit. But you'd be like, oh, I could just do X, Y, and Z. That would be easy. And that would probably be way better than anything I would come up with. Wolfie coming on. Matt, I have to ask, what's your favorite martial arts movie? Ooh, I've always liked Jackie Chan and Bruce Lee movies. Yes. It's funny. I've been Netflix has been recommending like classic martial arts movies and stuff I grew up watching when I was younger and stuff. And man, they did not age well. Like almost anything with Jean-Claude Van Damme did not age all so well. Like, I was a big Bloodsport fan back in the day when it came out. And now I'm looking at it like, wow, this is cheesy. But I mean, you can't go wrong with Enter the Dragon. Even though it's got the 70s vibe, waka cha waka cha waka cha waka cha kind of thing going on. That's just martial arts cinema greatness at its best right there. When I moved out here to Colorado, here in Littleton, we have Alamo Draft House, where you can order food and watch movies and stuff. And the first movie I saw, they had a big screening of Enter the Dragon on the big screen. That was awesome. So that's up there. I've always also been a big Jet Li fan. I always like the way he moves. It's so simple and so direct. It's always fun to watch him. So I'm trying to think of anything that comes up off the top of my head, but it's been a long time since I've seen any martial arts movies. Maybe that'll be something fun to do for tonight. Eggman coming on. Hey, Matt, how do you feel about simple and sinister kettlebell program? Could it be enough for general fitness or too simplified for our taste? Kettlebell swings, Turkish get-ups. Absolutely. Now, in all honesty, I don't really know the program. I know I should be ashamed of myself. I did attend RKC seminars. A lot of my friends are kettlebell enthusiasts. I've learned enough about kettlebells just so I don't look like a complete ignoramus when I'm coaching it to people. But I mean, if you're going to take anything about the kettlebell, it's the swing and the Turkish get-up is what I would recommend. Because a lot of the other stuff that you would do, like snatches, cleans, and stuff, that's kind of almost a modification off of a hip hinge movement, which is why, of course, they teach the hip hinge to begin with. And the swing is just basically the most direct hip hinge movement of the kettlebell series. So, I think it's fantastic. And this is a big thing that I find people get lost in when they get really into a particular method or modality, like calisthenics or kettlebell or something like that. They're like, okay, I'm going to make this my main thing. And they feel like they've got to do every exercise under the sun when it comes to that modality. When the reality is you're probably better off just focusing on a couple of the basic fundamental exercises and leaving it at that. Like when it comes to calisthenics, some sort of pushing, pulling, and lunging variation will probably give most people 80% of everything they need from it. All right. So when it comes to kettlebell, Turkish get up and swings, that's probably about what most people need from it. You're like, I want the benefits of kettlebell training. That'll do it. And of course, you can experiment with snatches and cleans and presses and all that sort of thing for variety. But yeah, I think it's a fantastic way to go about it. And then you can make that as your foundation and your base level. Excuse me. Hey, man, can you tell me exercises for lower traps? Anything pulling, my friend. Now, remember, exercises don't work muscles. Hey, that's one lesson I always want to tell people. Exercises do not work muscles. Your muscles are engaged and worked from your brain. If you had the nerves severed from your lower traps to your brain, nothing you do would ever work. Okay? But the second you can engage your traps more, everything you do will work if it uses your traps. So literally, the objective now is don't think of what exercise uses the lower traps. Use your lower traps with every exercise. Push-ups, dips, pull-ups, rows, deadlifts, kettlebell swings, Turkish get-ups. I don't care if you're freaking going for a run. Use your lower traps just at least a little bit, create some stability, improving that posture, shoulders back and stuff. The more you can engage a muscle with everything, the more effectively you'll be able to build and strengthen it. That's what happened with my calves. You're like, how are your calves so big and strong? One, luck. Again, a lot of it boils down to luck. But two, I got really good at using my calves. So it wasn't any one exercise. Yes, I was a bike racer and I used my calves a lot on the mountain bike and stuff. But it's because I use my calves a whole lot for everything. Walking up a flight of stairs, just kind of, dancing on the balls of my feet and taekwondo and stuff. I use my calves all the time for everything. And that's going to be a hell of a lot more effective than this is your number one effective lower trap exercise kind of thing. Get good at using your traps and use them all the time. And of course, anything that involves your back should be using those lower traps a lot. Very good. Prod, hey, Matt, I recently got pretty sick. Sorry to hear that, my friend. Didn't eat or didn't train or eat well for a couple of days. How to get my muscle back? Oh, it's been a couple of days. Don't worry about it. You didn't lose anything. Don't worry. Don't worry about it at all, my friend. But this is a very good question because I get this one quite often where people will experience some sort of a setback in their life, illness or injury or something like that. And they're like, I'm dealing with this sort of thing. Like, how do I, retain sort of things? And a lot of times the answer is, nope, you're going to lose. You're going to be behind the 8 ball. Case in point, me, over a month ago, I hurt myself skiing. My knee got really kind of wrecked and tweaked and stuff, and it's still not all that great. I still can't really do a lot of hamstring work. So am I losing games? Absolutely. There's nothing I can do about that. Yes, I'm using my isometrics, and yes, I'm doing what I can and working around the injury, but pain will always hold you back. There's no workaround that's sufficient for that. So of course you're going to lose out. But it takes time to lose out. I mean, if it's only been a couple of days, don't worry about it. If anything, you're recovering better and you're probably going to be better off. Generally 3 to 4 weeks, maybe detrimental a little bit. But in that case, like you've got something working against you, you do what you can with what you have. And once the injury clears up or the illness or whatever, just jump right back onto it and do whatever you were doing beforehand. It'll bounce right back. So that's why I'm not too worried about, like, are my hamstrings weaker? Are my legs weaker? Absolutely. Not a whole lot I can do about that right now. But once they get right back into form and I can get back to my normal training, it's not going to take much at all to get it back into my usual form. And that's why I'm not worried about it. It's like, okay, temporary setback, no big deal. Frederico, it's good to see you, my friend. Hey, Matt, good to see you. As likewise, can you talk about how do you periodize? There's so many ways you can do this. There's a ton of different ways, but don't overthink it. A lot of people, they look at periodization as if they're trying to solve some sort of Da Vinci Code, rocket science of work. No. All you need to do with periodization is that you have different training objectives that you focus on at different times. And you can do this any way that you want. You could do it like in grind style calisthenics, where we literally do different phases in the same workouts. We have our strength phase, where we keep the resistance heavy and the repetitions low. And then we have the hypertrophy or the finisher phase, where we do the opposite. Weight is moderate, repetitions are much higher. So you're just changing gears there. You could do it every other workout. You could do it every other week. You could do it every other month. And it really just kind of, I tell people, just do it however you feel like it. Some people, they like to stick with a particular type of training where they're like, okay, I'm going to go heavy and I'm going to keep it really low in the repetitions for a month. And then the next month, I'm going to change gears because they like to get in the groove, working out a certain way and then changing it up. Some people, they like to do it in the same workout like I do. I just like to feel like I'm getting more out of the workout as a whole. So basically, you have different training objectives and you just change when you're focusing on each objective. And as long as you're not just going too long about it, like, okay, I did, explosive work for 6 months and then I didn't do it again for another 6 months or something. As long as you're getting the changes at least once a month or 6 weeks or so, you're probably going to be good and fine. But yeah, base it around schedule, base it around preference, that sort of thing, because different people just adapt and they respond better to certain types of approaches to periodization based on preference. Let's see. Skywalker is saying, looking like a tank in the green shirt. Thank you so very much. So yeah, my upper body has definitely been starting to respond a lot better because I've gotten more stability in my right shoulder. Very, very finicky. Again, thanks much to my chiropractor helping me with that. And let's see, any other questions I'm missing here? Esteban, hey Matt, is it a good idea to take a long break from working out every now and again, like say for a whole week or two? Or is it always better to always try to constantly work out? I'm always a big fan of just doing what you can with what you have, because a lot of times life is going to force a break in some way, shape, or form anyway. All right, you get sick for a week, boom, there's a break. Sometimes you may go on a trip. It's like, okay, I'm going on a trip and I'm going to be touring around Europe or whatever. I'll still get in some push-ups or whatever here and there, but is it going to be the same as before? No. Okay, great. It's a break kind of thing. So take breaks as needed. I know a lot of times people will have deload weeks and they'll take breaks purposely as part of like a periodization plan, but I've never been a big fan of that because sometimes people would hit that deload week and they're like, oh man, I'm really feeling good and I'm making progress and I'm motivated to train. And it just seems like in those circumstances, that's the last time you're going to want to stop. But at the same time, people are like, okay, my deload week isn't for another 4 weeks, but man, I am so burned out and tired and I'm feeling like my joints are achy and stiff and everything, but nope, can't do my deload week next. So as I'm always telling with intraset rest as needed. If you want to take a break, by all means, take a break. Week or two off, no big deal. But if you're not feeling it and you just want to keep going, keep going. It's perfectly fine to do so. Excuse me, very dry out here. I'm also dehydrated. Yesterday was opening day here for the Colorado Rockies. And that's always, it's funny. Baseball out here in Colorado, we're not really a baseball town. We're a drinking town with a baseball problem, as they would say. So a lot of my friends, we just use it as an excuse to get together and drink a lot. So Matt is asking, hey Matt, I'm currently recovering from a cracked rib. Ouch. Oh, those are tough. And I've been wondering if there's some benefits to taking a few weeks off. Once again, read that it helps with your muscle plasticity. What do you think? I don't know about the muscle plasticity sort of thing, but whenever it comes to injury, I'm always more of a fan of work around it, like do something, because the body was never really meant to just be like out for the count. Back in the day before we had cars and computers and stuff like that, almost all forms of productivity within society required some measure of physical activity. Even if you just wanted to be social, you had to walk to your friend if you wanted to see them. So some sort of physical activity. Sedentary is not the most natural of states for us to be in. And a lot of us, the only activity we get sometimes is from exercise. So try to be at least somewhat active. It may help with the healing process of that rib to at least just get the blood flowing a little bit. Some casual walking. Maybe you can find a couple of gentle yoga poses that can be helpful as well. Just if nothing else, keeps the mental edge. That's what I always find. If I go a while without training due to injury or something, or illness, and I'm really out for the count, getting back into it is a bit of a slog, and it's a lot harder to get that wheel of momentum going again. So try to be active to some degree, but of course, be gentle with your body. Let it heal up for sure. Couple of quick ones. Again, Prod asking, hey Matt, how to not have elbow pain during negatives on gym rings, false grip, pull-ups. Your back is not engaged enough, my friend. So again, scaps back and pull those shoulder blades together. So when we have our shoulders protracted, and we have too much internal rotation, that's what's causing a lot of that stress in there. So really pinch the mother living hell out of those shoulders. And keep in mind, though, that if you do have an injury, even if you do things correctly, it's still going to hurt it because it's injured. If you sprain your ankle and then you tried walking on it, you're like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. What am I doing wrong? And it's like, well, walking is fine, but you're walking with a sprained ankle. Of course, it's going to be bad. So if you do have an injury in the elbow, let it heal up and work around it as always. Jen Zem, good insight here. Hey, Matt, in regards to sport and game a bit earlier on, what do you define as getting in shape versus general fitness? Oh, that is so good. So general fitness is one of those things of like, just do whatever. Seriously, whatever. This is one of the reasons I think why like Orange Theory and like CrossFit and stuff took off so well. Because a lot of times when I would sit down with people and they're like, oh, I'm here for my one free personal training session. I'm like, what do you want? And they're like, I just want to be in shape. Like they don't have anything specific. It's just like, I just want to be in shape. That was great. Like generalized things, like just do literally anything, anything at all. It's going to work as long as it's nothing too specific. It's like, I got some weights, I got some cardio, I go swimming, I jump rope, I play chess, I do like whatever, just throw a bunch of stuff in a pot, heat it up and eat it kind of thing. That's in shape, right? But getting general fitness sort of thing. But when it comes to getting in shape, that's more specific. Like in shape for what? Because no one's ever going to be in shape for everything. In fact, the more specific you get, the more out of shape you're going to be for everything else. And that's why it's very important to understand exactly what you want to go after. Like I can ride that mountain bike long and fast, but I suck as a runner and I'm a terrible swimmer. To me, successfully swimming means not drowning if I fall out of a canoe. That's how good a swimmer I am. Now, that would be a big problem if I was a triathlete, right? I always said I'd be a great triathlete if it wasn't for the whole running and swimming thing. So, but I don't care. I don't need to be a good runner. So for me to be in shape, I'm out of shape as a runner. I'm in very bad shape as a runner, but I'm moderately in shape for biking. So that's what being in shape is more about, is what do you need your body to be able to do? What's important for you to do? And then go after that specifically. And don't worry about like all the other things that you're missing out on. Focus on what's important to you and what you want. Let's see. Arthur coming on. Is it good to start in bodyweight training? Always. Although technically everybody's already bodyweight training. Have you walked today? Did you get out of bed? Have you ever gotten up off the floor? Have you stood up off of a seat, a chair or something? That's fundamentally bodyweight training. Moving your body through space. That's all we're doing. Because again, like I said earlier, fitness is all about influencing the physiological processes that are always happening. So bodyweight training is a good example of that. We're always bodyweight training. Me moving my arm like this is bodyweight training. Right? So we are always doing this sort of thing. This process of physiological stimuli and adaptation is ongoing. It's always happening. Whenever we like, okay, I'm going to do 3 sets of 10 squats or whatever, all you're doing is you're taking that process and you're kind of grabbing onto it with both hands and saying, I'm going to direct the process a little bit in this direction to develop in this particular way. And it's kind of like a fire hose. It's just spraying all over the place. And suddenly, and finally you grab onto it and you're like, no, spray over there. That's where I want the water to go. It's the same thing. The process, you're going to be directing it somehow. That's all you're doing with training. You're not making anything happen. You're just directing the direction, the way that it's happening towards what target versus just anywhere, whatever, who cares kind of thing, which is, again, more of a general fitness approach. Bob VT coming on. Do you think it's a good idea to correct for overcoming isometrics, lack of range of motion, by combining this with full range of movements? So my goal is healthy and strong. Absolutely. Both dynamic and isometric are very, very beneficial. And always remember too, that no training method is complete in and of itself. You're always going to have massive shortcomings no matter what you do. The biggest question though is, what shortcomings are you fine with? Like, again, I suck as a swimmer. No matter how much I ride that mountain bike, I'm always going to suck as a swimmer. No matter how many calisthenics I do, no matter how many times I practice my Taekwondo, I'm always going to be a bad swimmer. I'm cool with that. As long as I don't drown if I fall out of a canoe, that's literally all I need. That's all I care about, which is very good. Because a lot of times in our fitness culture, you'll have coaches and say, you're not in shape unless you can do this, and you're not in shape if you can't do that. And a lot of times people are trying to push their priorities onto you. But the bottom line is, if it doesn't matter to you, it just doesn't matter. Full stop. So if you don't care about being able to do a lot of things that your program is missing, then so what? But yeah, we want to be able to move. And so that's probably something that you should be addressing to some degree. But it doesn't take much to make that happen. Like, you could have 99% of your program overcoming isometrics, and you're just doing some basic push-ups and squats and body weight rows just to kind of get the blood flowing and joint, lotion, motion is lotion, as they say, and stuff. Fine, great. It probably doesn't take as much as like, okay, I did an overcoming isometrics workout, now I must do a dynamic workout. You can literally do one a week or one even a month, and it probably would take care of you. You can really prioritize a lot, and it does not take much to influence the process in a very good way. A couple last ones here. Atlanta K. Hey, Matt, what do you think of one-arm jackknife pull-ups as a progression towards jackknife pull-ups and the full pull-up? I have trouble finding a progression that bridges the gap between the two. Yeah, it's definitely a good idea. I'm more akin to one-arm rows myself, as opposed to the one-arm jackknife pull-ups, just because I find that it's got a little bit more of that full body stability to it. You get the hamstrings and the hips engaged. So I would say, go with the one-arm rows more than anything else, because that's also a really good bicep worker as well. It's a very, very satisfying way to hit things. And it's also one of those things that I find is a good way to identify discrepancies and weaknesses between right and left side. It's one of the great things about unilateral training. People do rows on one side and they're like, great. And then they do on the other side and their shoulders like hunched up to their ear or something. And they're like, whoa, okay, that's different. And like, yeah, the lower traps or whatever we were talking about earlier, that can be one of those things that needs to be addressed. All right. So yes, the past two episodes, just kind of quickly wrapping up here. So last episode, make sure you go check it out. The audio is on the Red Delta Project podcast and stuff about how the fundamentally flawed approach to fitness is the method-based approach of, if you do X, you're going to get result Y. But the reality is, a lot of people have Y without doing method X. A lot of people who do method X do not get the result that they want. And people have always been able to get in shape without any particular method. That doesn't mean those methods can't be effective at being a strong influence, but it does mean that they're not essential, that there's not that direct line of effectiveness of, you do this diet, you're going to get abs. You do this workout, you're going to build bigger biceps. That line of reasoning is a lot more muddy than we think it is, because there's a lot of other influential variables just kind of muddying the water, so to speak. So recognizing that it is about these physiological processes that are ongoing, and that your behaviors are influencing that process, but we're never in full control of it, is what's most empowering. And it gives you the ability, through creativity and playfulness, to be able to create your own approaches that are probably going to have far more impact and stronger influential control, as opposed to just blindly following some sort of program and diet because it's, quote, supposed to work and whatnot. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming on. It is greatly appreciated. Don't forget, check out today's sponsor of Duonomic, of the best calisthenics doorway equipment. They're via pull-up handles and their rings and stuff. Link is down below. Grind Style is the promo code for 10% off. And I've got the links to the video reviews of those products as well, if you want to learn more about those as well. And thank you very much for coming on and asking your insightful questions, folks. I will leave you to your weekend. Hope you have a great one, and I'll talk to you next week. Till then, be fit and live free.